All right, let's get into this Bengals stuff, this Maxx Crosby stuff. Each and every year at the Super Bowl, as I mentioned at the top, the rumors are swirling, right? There's reporters out there saying, oh, this guy's unhappy, he wants a trade, or this guy's leaning towards this team, or this quarterback wants this guy to get re-signed. Part of what makes Super Bowl week so good. And in years past, it's been Joe Burrow kind of doing the rounds, telling everybody that his teammates need to get paid. This year, it's a little bit different. I don't want to act like Jamar and T were banging the table, right? I mean, you sign up to do these interviews, they're going to ask you these types of questions, and I can respect it because they were just kind of being honest. And it made me appreciate them a little bit more, too, because they just kind of sounded like fans when they were talking to, I think, Ocho and Shannon Sharp was somebody, and Kay Adams certainly was talking to them there as well. But they're just sitting there like, yeah, I mean, Maxx Crosby is awesome. I would love for him to be here in Cincinnati, and I can relate to that. I think all of us here as Bengals fans can relate to that there as well. They also threw out the name of Jeffrey Simmons. Simmons, I would be really surprised if he were to be moved because their new head coach is Robert Saleh, obviously a defensive guy. Jeffrey Simmons, in my opinion, is the best defensive tackle in pro football, and I think pretty clearly is the Tennessee Titans' best player. I think when I'm Bob Saleh taking that job, the first thing I'm saying before I agree and sign on the dotted line is, hey, we're not moving him, right? We're keeping Jeffrey Simmons. Okay, good, and go from there. So I would be surprised. Simmons' name, of course, has been thrown around in trade talks for a couple of years now, it feels like. But, this is a new start in Tennessee, and it feels like they're going to want him to be a foundational piece, they being Robert Saleh, as a defensive guy. But the Maxx Crosby thing is interesting. Maxx Crosby is one of my favorite players in the National Football League. Zach Taylor has said that as well. He said, outside the guys in our locker room, Crosby's one of my favorites. Joe Burrow has said similar things. It's a shame that a player like that is on such a bad team. We see this from time to time, like Joe Thomas, right, an all-time great offensive lineman, played for Cleveland, so it's like, okay. But like Crosby, I think he actually is a little bit underrated just because he's on Vegas, right? And think about when Vegas got to the playoffs and played Cincinnati here in town. A big reason why it was because of Maxx Crosby. And, he said he wants to be a Raider forever. If there's anybody that truly embodies the Las Vegas Raiders, it is Maxx Crosby. But at some point, as someone that's as competitive as he is, and it's been as bad as it has for such a long time, I think he'll retire a Raider, but I think he's got to understand that he ain't playing quarterback here, right? He's not playing kicker. Like at some point, he's gonna be a shell of himself. It happens, right? Age catches up to everybody, and he's got a few more elite years left, maybe just a couple more elite years left, and I don't think anybody in Raider Nation should knock him if, he ultimately decides, I want to trade. And I think if you look at it from a Vegas perspective too, it's not like, they're a couple pieces away from being a contender. This is a full rebuild, and unfortunately for Crosby, he's been a part of multiple rebuilds. They've just screwed it up every time, and it's been like a constant rebuild my whole life, seemingly. But it's going to take some time in Vegas. Like, they're going to get their guy in Mendoza. They're going to get his feet wet. And we know in the NFL you can turn it around quickly, a la New England. But that's not happening in Vegas this coming year, right? And they need to load up on some more picks, right? And if they can get somebody in the top 10 to trade, all of a sudden you take Mendoza at 1, then you get another top-of-the-line pick. I think that would be very advantageous for the Las Vegas Raiders. And Jay Glazer's the one that initially reported this on Radio Row. And there should be 31 teams calling. That is what the case should be, right, for Maxx Crosby. There should be 31 teams picking up the phone, calling Johnny Spytek and Tom Brady and saying, what's it going to take to get Maxx Crosby? And the Cincinnati Bengals absolutely should be one of those teams. Now, you talk about how realistic it is, right? I understand, right? We're talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm not going to sit here and blow smoke. The chances of this happening, they're not 0, but they're close to 0, right? It's not the same percent chance of Joe Burrow being a Minnesota Viking. That is 0. I can assure you on that. But this feels like it is close to 0. But when you look at some of the numbers here, it's feasible in order for this to happen. Crosby is under contract through 2029. He signed a 3-year extension last offseason. If the Bengals did trade for him, they would be basically guaranteeing him $30 million in 2026, and the final 3 years of his deal are essentially option years that don't have any guaranteed money. So $30 million, you just paid Trey Hendrickson that, right? So I don't think the money aspect of that is a problem at all. Like, you make a sacrifice against the cap to get him, yes. It's just the compensation that you would have to give up in order to get him. I think it's pretty obvious. You got to give up pick number 10. From there, what do you have to give up? Do you have to give up your first rounder in 27? And if you told me you got to give up your pick at number 10 overall and your first round pick in 2027, which hopefully you're picking 32nd next year, right? If you get Maxx Crosby, the chances of that being the case certainly go up. And you asked me, would you do that? 2 first rounders for Maxx Crosby? I'd probably say yes, if I'm being honest. I think a lot of people also would say yes out there. Now, that goes against everything Cincinnati is about. This would be, they haven't made an offseason trade since 2018 when they moved around the draft. They made the move for Khalil Herbert at the deadline 2 years ago, right? They don't do this. But you talk about fit, right? Fit is everything in this league. I'd say Maxx Crosby fits in just about perfectly here on this team. What does he want to do? He wants to compete for a championship. Maxx Crosby and Joe Burrow, that seems like those guys kind of align with how they're wired, right? And if you're Maxx Crosby, maybe you don't want to live here in Cincinnati, which is you shouldn't. You should, because it's such a great place to live, in my opinion. But I get coming from Vegas, not wanting to live in Cincinnati. But he did play at Eastern Michigan, right? And he was a MAC guy, so maybe there's some interest there. But I totally would do this if I'm the Bengals. And as much as I love Caleb Downs, do you give up Caleb Downs to get Maxx Crosby? Yeah. And it's a big swing, and it would be totally out of character for Cincinnati to do something like this, but they should absolutely be one of the teams that calls, right? And then you got to gauge his interest, because if you're Maxx Crosby, you think about where you want to go, right? Chicago's a name that's been floated around, but you want to go somewhere with an elite quarterback, and he's not going to Kansas City. So you can take that off the list. He's probably not going in division period, so you can take Denver and LA off the list too. I think Chicago makes some sense. I think Cincinnati makes some sense. I think Baltimore probably makes some sense there as well. San Francisco certainly makes sense there additionally, but you should absolutely be one of these teams. You should be calling and just kind of seeing what it is. The question becomes, do you give up the multiple firsts or not? I think all of us definitely would give up to pick 10 overall and probably the second round pick to get Maxx Crosby. But the question is, do you do 2 first rounders? And right now, if you ask me, I would say, you know what? I think I would. But will Cincinnati do that? No. We understand this. It's not going to happen. But, T and Jamar are floating it out there. Right? You best believe that Duke Tobin and the Brown family and the Blackburn family, they've heard that soundbite, right? Their ears perked up a little bit there. Is it going to make them do anything? Probably not. But Maxx Crosby, we talk about Caleb Downs altering your defense and making you good right away. That's how Maxx Crosby is too, and it's obviously at a much more premier position at edge rusher. So it would be very exciting. Maybe we'll get some more updates here. Wouldn't get your hopes up at all. But I think it's fair to say that the chances are greater than 0. Right? Not that you should be overly optimistic about that, but greater than 0, I think, is fair for what the chances are right now. And you have the advantage of having Joe Burrow, right? And Maxx Crosby and Joe Burrow, they get along well. Zach Taylor clearly would be open to the idea if you just go back to hearing him talk about Maxx Crosby. Got a lot of love and respect for him. How could you not? That's your missing piece right there. And then still could get some, linebacker help, obviously, and some secondary help beyond that. But that's kind of like we talk about all in, right? That's an all in move, trading for Maxx Crosby, and he would look pretty good in stripes. I will say that, but we'll see. I thought it was interesting that T and Jamar went out there and said that, though. At the end of the day, they're kind of fans like we are this time of the year, right? There's nothing they can do other than get people to talk about what they're saying like we're doing right now. But at the end of the day, they're probably sitting there going, yeah, we haven't been able to rush the passer, and Maxx Crosby's elite. And he's probably going to get traded by the Raiders. Like, yeah, let's call. Let's figure it out. Let's see what they're looking for. But, again, it's going to be very, very competitive. But I think, right, again, I would come to Cincinnati. I'm biased. I'm from Cincinnati. Would he come here? Well, Joe Burrow's here. Jamar Chase is here. T. Higgins is here. And I think it kind of has similar feelings as Vegas. Like, I think part of the reason why he was so proud to be a Raider is because he wanted to be a part of the solution, because it was a once proud franchise that had been bad for so long. Now you can make the argument the Bengals have never been a proud franchise, but they've been so bad for so long, and he could be that missing piece to get them over the top and get them to Super Bowl glory. So maybe that would entice him. He's not afraid of the cold again, played at Eastern Michigan. Kind of feels like more of a Midwest guy, despite the fact he's out on the West Coast now. But I think the Bengals would be on a relatively short list. I think if you ask Maxx Crosby to lay out his top 6 to 8 teams, the Bengals would be on that list. in my opinion. But we'll see. Also, defensive tackle. How is Cincinnati going to approach this offseason? I've said this at the top of the show. I think this is one of the more fascinating things to keep an eye on this offseason because there's not a clear plan for what you should do. We floated out a couple of free agent names. Will Cincinnati say that, well, the guys that didn't have much production elsewhere, we're going to bring them in just because they're new and we know what we have here doesn't work? That's what I would do. But would it surprise you if they were like, well, these guys on the open market aren't very good. They don't have much production. We'll just roll with BJ and TJ one more time. That wouldn't surprise you. I don't think that is the right approach because I don't think you can bank on them just getting better this year. And you could argue that if you put more stability around them at edge and at linebacker, they will be better. Is that true? I don't know. Is Jenkins and Jackson or one of those guys going to make a Myles Murphy leap? If you remember when Al Golden first got here, one of the players that he was so impressed with was Chris Jenkins, but that turned into nothing. It's funny because Geno Stone and Barrett Carter and Myles Murphy for a while and Shamar Stewart and all these guys have gotten a lot of flack. Chris Jenkins should be getting a ton of flack. That's not a fifth-round pick. That is a second-round pick that you took to come in and be a run stopper and provide some interior pass rush, and he hadn't done a thing, right? So the Bengals aren't going to cut those guys. That goes against their whole philosophy there as well. So I would think that Jackson, of course, requested a trade this year. I don't think he's going to get one. So I think Jackson and Jenkins are definitely back, and you just want to keep Hill and Slayton too. I think that would be a mistake. So I would bring in two new guys. I think you have to cut at least one of them. And then who do you cut? Hill's a little bit older. I think there's a little bit more upside with Slayton. Another year with Jerry Montgomery. Of course, they were together in Green Bay. That's just what my gut says, but I don't have a strong opinion there on which guy you would keep and which guy you wouldn't. But when you look at the draft and free agency, it's not like there's a long list of guys, right? Like edge, you feel okay about being able to solve that because there's pieces that are available through the draft and through free agency. Nobody is projected top 10 in the draft from an interior pass rush perspective, right? And if you got the Clemson guy, Peter Woods, that would be an absurd reach at 10. And then at the second round, are you going to get anybody that can come in and really be a game changer for you? And there's nobody in free agency. There's Franklin Myers for Denver, but he's kind of in a spot where he's the only really good player at his position in free agency. It's going to be a gross overpay for him. Cincinnati's not interested in doing that. So where do you go from here? Because Geno Atkins isn't walking through that door. And, Geno Atkins, I said this at the top, one of the most underrated players of my lifetime, eligible for the Hall of Fame now. Feels like a bit of a stretch. Wouldn't surprise me. Definitely a future Ring of Honor guy. All those Bengals defenses that got to the playoffs before they lost, I mean, he was a focal point of that, and he was a run stopper, and he would get some sacks there as well. And those guys don't just pop up out of thin air. And unfortunately, they weren't able to take advantage fully of a great player in Geno Atkins. And ever since that point, they've been reeling at that position. And I think DJ Reader brought him some stability, and he brought him some leadership there as well. But he wasn't getting after the quarterback. He was stopping the run, which was great. Wish we had that now. But he wasn't getting after the quarterback, which is why when we did our mock offseason, I was like, you know what, I'm open to bringing DJ Reader back. And I know, fans fall into this all the time, and sometimes I'm guilty of this as well, where it's like, Von Bell, he was great here, Super Bowl, goes to Carolina for a year, bring him back. They bring him back, and he's no good anymore. I hope that's not the case with Eugenio Suarez, right? He leaves, the Reds have some promise, he comes back, oh my goodness, Geno's back to save us. Hopefully it works out. He hits 40-plus nukes, but, there's a reason why his market was what it was. Nobody was willing to give him multiple years. I'm worried I might be falling into a trap here with DJ Reader, but I look across free agency and I look at the draft, and I'm like, I think that's probably your best option, right? Because Sheldon Rankins, based on how he played this past year, was a good option, but you can't do that again. That was just a complete disaster here in Cincinnati. And before he had the illness, he had the hamstring, and he literally showed nothing. Well, probably the biggest bust of the last 10 years as far as free agency goes for the Bengals. And he's balled out with Houston, which was very frustrating to see. Happy for him because he did have the serious illness. I forget exactly, but he lost a ton of weight. It was bad. He should have came out, his team should have came out and said how bad it was. Maybe they were trying to hide it so he could get a deal in free agency, which he ended up getting with Houston. But that whole situation was odd in the fan base. Like, there was so much animosity towards him because we're like, this guy's been sick forever. What do you mean sick? Was he at strep? Was he got COVID? What's going on? But you can't bring him back, right? You can't do that. Reeder, of course, left on great terms as far as with the fan base and his production on the field for Cincinnati. So to me, that's like kind of your best option. But again, do you want to fall in? Is this going to be a Von Bell situation? Right? You hope not. But I don't know. I have no clue what they're going to do. But I do know one thing. It better not be, there's not very many options out there, so we'll just kind of go with B.J. Hill and T.J. Slayton and hope Chris Jenkins can make a Miles Murphy-esque leap. That would be a massive mistake for the Cincinnati Bengals. So that's going to be a position that we're going to monitor pretty closely here. And I don't have many ideas. I don't have many answers here at this point. But that to me, it has to get figured out. Because it's been so bad since Geno Atkins left. And certainly since DJ Reader left as well. That's got to get shored up. And, at worst, give me a run stopper. Because that's all we heard about TJ saying, he's a good run stopper. Well, not really. Right? They were a heck of a lot worse when he wasn't on the field, which says a lot. But it didn't do a whole lot as far as stopping the run. The guys like Geno that'll get after the passer and stop the run, they don't just grow on trees. Right? They really don't. And John Franklin Myers at Denver is the one guy that's really good in free agency, and you have to grossly overpay in order to get him. And the Bengals aren't in the business of doing that.